This is a conversation that I've been having a lot of. And so for context, AMZ Prep, we've been really aggressively growing out the US. Every day is kind of a new challenge. And so if we look at things like one of our key programs is called Seller Fulfill Prime. I'm so excited, but you need to understand the trade-off, which is a level of inventory complexity. It is the hardest program to get into. And basically we're creating a prime delivery experience for hard to ship categories. So everybody thinks that more warehouses equals faster, cheaper, more streamlined shipping experience for the customer. In reality, depending on the size of the brand, it can be a money pit, a disaster, and an inventory management nightmare. In this episode, I'm going to be breaking down some of the challenges that I'm hearing from brands and some of the conversations around how we're thinking about multi-node, what we're doing at AMZ Prep from an overall thought process and methodology, and how to decide how to think about your network for your e-commerce business. This is a conversation that I've been having a lot of. And so for context, AMZ Prep, we've been really aggressively growing out the US for, I would call it 24 months now. And we're making a lot of progress. I'm so excited. Every day is kind of a new challenge, and we're building solutions and we're competing against the biggest and baddest in the US. And so we've really conquered the Canadian side and we've built our repertoire there. And over the past few years, US has just been this fireball of growth that we've just been, hanging onto the rocket ship. So the reason this conversation started was that I was speaking to a billion-dollar supplement brand. They ship out hundreds of thousands of orders a month. You know them very well. If I said them, you would absolutely see them everywhere online, Facebook and communities and so forth. Very big in the influencer world. And I strongly disagreed with their approach of how we're thinking about a multi-node and how their director of operations. And I challenged them. And I'm going to be sharing that same information, my thought process on this episode. So first and foremost, there does feel like this overall fallacy, the illusion of multi-node, and AMZ Prep is also a culprit of this, naturally because we have facilities across the country. But we're learning more and more as carriers get a little bit more strategic and the different carriers coming into the market that it might not actually make sense for a lot of brands. I think the overall theme and thesis is always that more warehouses equal faster shipping time and cheaper shipping costs, which can be true for the right style of merchant, but for some brands, it actually become a money pit and it can be an inventory disaster and it ends up costing them more than saving because they just didn't plan the network accordingly. They went with a 3PL who had something on the West Coast and something on the East without really digging into the data of locations. And they just decided that these were just the two locations that made the most sense for them, which in my opinion is a suicide mission. Operators get sold this, dream of a prime-like delivery, but then the warehouse can't actually keep up with it, or the software doesn't manage the complexity of what multi-channel actually means for merchants. Let me just talk about the echelons on both sides. On the left side, one warehouse. This is traditionally going to be your easiest from an inventory control. This will be the cheapest from a storage perspective. And depending on where in the country, we see a lot of brands end up leaning towards a California warehouse just because their inventory is coming from overseas. Even though if they looked at their data, 2/3 of their orders are going to New York, Florida, and Texas, they still decide that California is the best place to host it because they don't have to deal with the transit fees into a facility closer inland. And again, you're going to be paying for it one way or another. You're going to be paying for it with the inland. So you're going to have to ship a container to Texas hypothetically, or you're going to keep it in California and then you'll be paying the parcel fee to ship out there. You have to pick your poison accordingly, but from an inventory control, one location is always going to be the easiest, but you're going to take a lot of limitations on both your retail B2B strategy along with the parcel cost. So you're going to see a lot higher density of zone 5, 6, 7, 8, which is what we call no man's land. And that's traditionally where the marginal impact of carrier carts starts to really steep in. Zones 1 to 5, there's a marginal costing. But if you see the chart, even on our shipping zone analysis, zone 6, 7, 8 has this really steep spike because they're the most challenging to get to. And a good rule of thumb, higher shipping zones means higher shipping cost and worse delivery experience for the merchant, which at the end of the day, we want to create a prime-like experience from one facility. You will have a challenge doing so. Second scenario is a 2 warehouse option, traditionally pitched as like an east and a west. You get the benefit of better transit times, right? So now you might be optimizing for zones 1 to 6 because you won't hit zone 7, 8 if you have 2 facilities, maybe for just certain regions across the country. Your shipping time will be better and your shipping experience will be better, even if you don't choose like a priority shipping speed, because maybe you have a facility in Pennsylvania, California, or for example, Utah, Florida. We've seen those work really, really well. So we'll traditionally do California, New York, California, PA, California, Chicago. Could be California, Kentucky. It could be Utah, Kentucky. It could be California, Alabama, California, Texas. It depends on where the data is actually going through it, but we really have to break it down. But that is what a 2 warehouse gets you. Now let's go to the more extreme 3 warehouses or 4 facilities. So some of the benefits is now you actually start to tap into a Prime-like experience. So if we look at things like one of our key programs is called Seller Fulfill Prime. It is the hardest program to get into. And basically we're creating a Prime delivery experience for hard to ship categories, big and bulky, meltables, and we maintain the Prime badge. Very challenging to do. But we actually run that from 4 facilities or 5, which I'll get through. But when you're running 3, 4, or 5 facilities, you're going to get a Prime-like experience. Now, the trade-off of that is a few things. Is one, your inventory complexity. So if that 3PL doesn't have the technology to manage 3, 4, 5 different facilities, where the challenge starts to become is that one, keeping inventory in every single facility starts to become a nightmare, right? So one, you have to forecast not only from a total inventory pool, but on a per location basis. So you need to be able to see daily sales velocity so you can forecast. Is Pennsylvania, is Chicago, is Texas, is California, where's running out of stock and where do I need to replenish accordingly? So that's number one. Number two is you have storage now spread across multiple different facilities, which you need to factor in. And along with that, you have freight costs that you need to split accordingly. And again, it's not that 4 locations doesn't make sense, but you have to make sure you're tactical for the brand. And so these are some of the challenges that will pose: inventory complexity, forecasting, storage costs, freight costs. But the pros means very, very fast delivery. You're talking 1 and 2 day across the country now. Closest thing to Prime-like experience. Your shipping cost is going to go drastically down. Now you're hovering maybe zone 2, 3, 4, right? And now you have nothing above zone 5, which is very exciting, right? From a cost perspective and from a delivery experience perspective, without paying like an overnight or 1-day delivery. But for most brands under maybe $10 million, this creates way too much complexity for a small business that's growing, unless there's other scenarios which I'm going to be breaking down. Now, where does multi-node actually make sense for a brand? So I think there's a couple of factors that you can run into play. And I kind of just want to talk through it with just some of the categories of brands that we're seeing. And I don't have talking notes, so I want to just go through real scenarios that we're talking through with brands. So one of them, for example, let's talk about an apparel brand. The challenge with apparel brands is that you have a very high SKU assortment because you have small, medium, large. If you run an apparel brand, you know exactly what I mean. It's very easy to creep into, thousands and thousands of SKUs. So, while it looks best on paper to be using multi-node, where it might make more sense is that now you have to actually spread out your inventory of thousands of SKUs across multiple facilities. What that poses from a challenge is now you're paying storage in those facilities, and some of those SKUs are going to be low performers, some of them are high velocity, but you're going to have to keep both in multiple facilities. And you need to basically keep 100% at both facilities, because what's happened in the past, if a brand runs out in a high SKU assortment game, if a customer orders 2 leggings and a bra, and the bra is only available in California and not available in Chicago, now you're going to have to ship them 2 different orders from 2 different warehouses, right? Because you can't put everything into one parcel because you don't have the stock in all one location, which ends up adding a whole other factor of costing, which is the shipping cost. So a brand like an apparel brand, something like factoring this in is going to be critical because your storage cost is going to be such a big component of this. Now, what's exciting when you look at, let's call it the extremes, like an apparel brand, or maybe it's a small and light product that is actually really cheap to get across the country. These regional carriers have gotten really damn good. So we've spent so much time this year really building out our regional network. So we have this new program. We have one called Skip. We have another one called SpeedX. And what these are zone skipping across the country. So these are regional planes that fly across the country and they zone skip. Exactly what it sounds like. So, we'll have everything in our Texas facility. So we do this now for a big apparel brand. They're athleisure, you know them very well. And we do zone skipping. So we keep everything in Texas, I think it's like 6,000 or 7,000 SKUs, and we zone skip it across the country. So what happens is that we'll fly it to New York, right? So we have a passenger plane that we piggyback on. It flies to New York, and then we release it from there. So it looks like it's coming from a New York warehouse, but it's actually shipped from Texas. So we ship it there and then we release it there. So we had a big gaylord of all these orders going to New York, or like the region of New York, Pennsylvania, and so forth. And then we're releasing all the orders from there. And we do the same in Chicago and Florida and California and Seattle, Utah, and we zone skip the stock. And this is becoming a much bigger play for most of the brands that we're working with, because you're just able to optimize inventory and keep one single inventory pool. So a single node strategy might make a lot of sense for maybe a high SKU brand like Apparel and so forth, or it could be something very small and light. If you have anything that's in a high SKU product line or very light, you can probably get away with one facility. Now, as you grow, you still might want to optimize, because shipping from here to California, right, or from New York to California, Zone 8 will kill you regardless from a costing perspective. So as you grow, let's say over a couple thousand orders a month, then it might make sense to start looking at 2 nodes, but you need to understand the trade-off, which is a level of inventory complexity. If the 3PL can't manage it, some can, some don't. It's an honest conversation you need to have, and the transportation cost, but it's a small item. So again, you have to factor these 2 things in, along with considering how fast you want the customer to get it. When does multi-node really make a lot more sense? So when I was talking about Seller Fulfilled Prime, when we start getting into catalog that's a little bit heavier, or you're talking very high velocity in the 5, 10, 20,000 orders a month, multi-node becomes a lot more interesting of a conversation. So when we talk about big and bulky categories, is that you're shipping, for example, we ship mattresses, or we'll ship pools, we ship couches like the ones I'm sitting on. And when we do that, the cost of shipping an individual parcel can be, $20, $30, $50, $100, depending on the size of it. We do a ton of mattress fulfillment. And so the challenge of that is that when you want to create a white glove delivery, sometimes we actually have to build the mattress at the house that we're shipping it to. But then also we need to create Prime-like experience. In this instance, it actually has to be the Prime badge, right? Which is a whole different beast. And so what happens is that we need to optimize for literally ground zones 1, 2, 3, 4, because we can't use an air shipping program or a cheaper service like a DHL or USPS. You have to go with one of the big dogs like a UPS, a FedEx, and so forth. So you have to use a ground shipping. You can't use air, and you need to get everything there in 1 to 2 days. It is damn near impossible without going multi-enablement, right, from multiple locations. And if you did, you're going to get killed in shipping fees. Anything big and bulky, traditionally you have to go multi-node. One, if you want to hit metrics like Amazon SFP, but then on top of that, you can't overnight or air ship it. And if you want to create a decent experience, Amazon heavy as you get into higher zones is going to kill you, right? Anything big and bulky. So that's one scenario. But as you start creeping over above few pounds per item, that is where multi-node is really going to start to step in. So that ability to spread out stock between, for example, when we think about something like Seller Fulfilled Prime, it's usually California or it's Nevada for facility 1. Facility 2 is going to be in Texas. Facility 3 is going to be something like Atlanta, Carolina, maybe Kentucky. And then the 4th facility is traditionally Chicago or New York. And we analyze the data to see, but that's traditionally a 4 node. If there's a 5th node, it might be that we need 2 on the East Coast. It depends on order density, right? Like if you're shipping surfboards, right, there's only a few places in the country. But if you're shipping a mattress or an air conditioner, right, there's a lot of hot places in the US. You got to make sure that you're hitting those regions in the right time frame. So there's a lot of factors that can go into it. On top of that, if you have like a low SKU assortment, then like multi-node's very easy to do. It makes replenishment, inventory management, it's super simple. So you'll need to factor that in. Or if you're doing things like retailers. So a lot of retailers, if you expand to Walmart, Target, Costco, they may have DCs across the country that you're assigned, similar to Amazon FBA. And because of that, you got to make sure that you're routing them within a regional time frame. So shipping from California to New York, that freight transit time could be multiple days. You might actually miss the delivery window. Again, what I'm doing is I just want to give you all these scenarios because these are real-time factors that we talk about with brands that usually aren't discovered till we actually have that conversation with them. Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I do think similar to AMZ Prep, because we have multiple facilities, some brands naturally just tend towards leaning towards multiple facilities, when in reality, we could probably solve it from one. If it's a product below 1 pound, or if it's a high inventory SKU, they've been sold the pipe dream that they need 3, 4, 5 facilities by these big VC giants. And in reality, it's just adding complexity, and it's the golden shining star that they're getting sold onto. My suggestion for any brand getting into is that number one, lead with the data. Take 30, 60, 90 days. We actually have a tool called our network optimization tool. And what it does is it literally maps out every single one of our facilities, how much it's going to cost, and how do we optimize this. And the technology will literally tell us how many facilities to use. But even by just looking at your data, right? See how many are going to each regional area, look at the costing. You can do napkin math to see when it might actually make sense to be able to do so. But most brands can get away with 1 or 2 facilities across the country. As brands start to grow, or they're getting involved with more sophisticated programs like Seller Fulfill Prime, they're retailers, or they have big and bulky. This is when, multi-node starts to make a lot more sense for them. Just understand the trade-offs of being able to do so. I think it's not the best fit for everyone, but for the right brands, it can be a game changer. And with all these new regionals coming in, we're going to see a lot more brands being able to pick a 1-2 node facility scenario versus 3, 4, 5. My closing rant, multi-node isn't bad. It's just not that every brand needs to have an Amazon network experience, especially if you're a small growing business. You're going to overcomplicate. You're going to overinvest in spreading inventory across multiple facilities, and it'll be coming an impact on your margin, not a net gain, is my concern that I want to be able to share over. My suggestion is start with 1 to 2 facilities, review the data, and then start to grow together. A lot of our best brands, we tell them we want to keep everything in 1 facility to start with, get the tribal knowledge, make sure the teams understand that, make sure they really understand the SOPs, the packaging, the shipping type, love and adore the business, and then we'll start adding it to secondary facilities. There's nuances to this, obviously, but make sure that you run the numbers, make sure you have the right setup. And if you want, we can always do a network analysis. We just do them free of charge. So if you want to give us data, we'll do the analysis on your behalf. We just literally need like 90 days of shipping data. They'll map out exactly what facilities you need across the country for the most optimized. And then you can always work backwards based off non-optimized. Hope this is valuable. This is a bit of my rant. See you on the next one.